Welcome to the Tantric Taste. Today is day one or lesson one of this series. And I wanted to do this series to kind of give you guys a little taste of the power of Tantra. It's very easy to just read the stuff and look at YouTube videos and just, try to get as much information as possible from that. But it's a completely different story whenever we start putting into practice all of those things. So in the next 9 days, what we're gonna do is basically do like this very concentrated bootcamp style of tantric practices to help you feel the power of Tantra, the power of the Mahavidyas, because you cannot really devote yourself to something if you haven't received that felt embodied experience. So that's what we're going to be doing in the next 9 days. And let me just start kind of explaining what exactly is Pink Tantra, because there is a lot of confusion about what that is. So Pink Tantra is the combination between white and red Tantra. White Tantra is the spiritual Tantra that is basically, it doesn't involve any sort of sexual practices. It's all connected to meditation. There is a lot of breathing exercises, and it's a right hand path, tantric path, which means that it is orthodox, it has rules, it has, a guru devotee type of system. There is a lot of practices that one must do in order to be on the white tantric path. Because this isn't really connected with like sexual practices, it's going to be focusing on sexual energy as a force to be pulled up into the crown. Now, whenever we move into red tantra, we're looking at like sacred sexuality and all of the practices that's involved in that. I have my thoughts on like jumping straight into red tantra just because of, the state of the world and the amount of trauma that a lot of people have experienced, and why it's better to ease into it. So Pink Tantra is the middle path. It's a left-hand path, which means that it's unorthodox. It's a little bit, it's not necessarily very well accepted under conventional tantric teachings, because it is connected to the left hand in terms of is rooted in Shakta Tantra, which is the Tantra of the Mahavidyas and the understanding of the powers of Shakti. But it's going to have certain elements of white tantra to kind of set that spiritual foundation. And then there's going to be an interplay with the sexual energy and actually including the body. This doesn't mean that it's like sexual practices, because that will be considered red tantra, right? So in the Pink Tantra, you can do it solo, you can do it with a partner, but it doesn't really matter because it's everything starts within. That's why we begin with the white and start adding a little bit of red to kind of have this expansive yet safe experience and movement of the sexual energy through the body. So in this 9-day series, what we're gonna go through is the foundational practices of Tantra. So first, we are going to connect with the Mahavidya that we're going to be anchoring through her Tantra, her Nyasa, and different practices. I'll teach you how to create a ritual for to bring for an altar, and then we're going to learn a little bit more about her, because this is like the foundation, right? Like the roots of this Pink Tantra, or like my version of Pink Tantra, is Shakta Tantra. So we'll be working with one of the Mahavidyas, and then after that we're gonna receive an initiation into her mantra. So you can just go online and look up at a mantra, but whenever mantras are given, they have to be charged for them to like be effective. They have to be placed in certain parts of the body. So on the third day, we're gonna be doing that, the activation of the mantra, and then I'll explain all of the philosophy behind it. What is the mantra? What does it mean? How to do it? And then we'll do the activation. Then we're gonna do the Nyasa ritual, and the Nyasa is basically anchoring down the mantra into the body with a very specific ritual. And this is what's going to bridge your physical body to your astral body to create that connection and be able to actually harness the energies of the Mahavidya that we're working with. And this is the beginning of the flavor of it. That's why I named this the taste of Tantra, because you're gonna feel it by that day for sure, especially after the Nyasa ritual. Then we're gonna do a purification ritual to basically remove from your auric field and emotional body any attachments of old partners, any sexual distortions. And this is more into, like, it's a little bit of ritualistic magic, but it's very much rooted on spiritual and energetic hygiene. Then we're gonna do our first sexual practice to begin turning the sexual energy and feeling it. And we are going to be working again, bringing in every single day of the series. We're gonna be bringing in the Mahavidya that I will be working with, just so she can help in that process. And the sexual practice will be a solo practice, so we'll cover that when we get there. Then we're going to talk about the sexual shadow that can show up whenever we begin doing these exercises. And this is an extremely important lesson, because we're working with sexual energy. Like, that's our most potent, powerful energy. That's, the life force. That's what created us. And that is a place where a lot of our distortions and traumas just kind of get pushed down into. So whenever we start stirring sexual energy and we start pulling it up, and we move into more like the sexual practices, a lot of things can come up, a lot of like repression, a lot of lust. And so during that day, we're gonna explore how to move through that, how to navigate it, how you can help yourself from now forward if you continue doing these sexual practices. Then we're gonna do a heart activation with a tantric massage technique. And this is also another form of sexual practice, but this one is going to be to help you spread the energy. Because what you'll notice is, as you begin doing these practices, there's gonna be a lot of heat. It's almost like I don't want to say there's like this flavor of arousal that's a little bit too much. So these tantric massage practices help spread the energy through the heart center. And that's what we want to do. We want to pull the sexual energy into the heart, because that's where it gets purified. And then that's the energy that will eventually push into our crown chakra. And then lastly, we're gonna do a quick exercise to help yourself identify the appropriate masculine energy. So this is more of like pulling and testing masculine energy. It's gonna help us put everything together, and I'll give you some exercises to help yourself as you begin exploring this, because at the end of the day, it is a solo journey, but it's a solo journey. Like, we are not alone. We have all of these interactions. We interact with our environment, we interact with people, we interact with animals. Like, there's this constant energetic movement. So during this lesson, it's almost like we're going to learn how to use this energy that has been moved, that has been triggered and activated, and how to begin like pulling energy. Because on the feminine path, we're talking with the energy of magnetizing. It's like I have a video on my YouTube here that is called Drive versus Magnetism. So if you're confused about that, make sure you watch that. And otherwise, well, let's begin with today's lesson. All right, so let's explore a little bit deeper the path of Pink Tantra and why it's so important to begin with the white path before you move into the red, and actually Pink Tantra becoming a path of its own. So like I mentioned, whenever we are talking about white tantra, this energy, these practices, they are not really connected to any sort of like sexual practices, even though we're dealing with the sexual energy. And there's a lot of breathing exercises, a lot of discipline in that. This is a strong foundation, because I have not met the first human being that is completely trauma-free. We all have some sort of trauma. It's a spectrum. Some people have really intense trauma. Some people have some cultural traumas. But at the end of the day, we all fall under that spectrum. Whenever we're talking about sexual trauma, which a lot of women have, even if they haven't been sexually abused, there's so many layers to that white tantra offers the purification, and it helps us purge and purify and move all of those distortions before we start actually playing and churning our sexual energy. Because what tends to happen if we go straight into the red path of red tantra, and we start like moving energy just carelessly in that way, is that like our chakras, there's like the snake of the kundalini. It moves like this, and the places where it meets, that's the cross. That cross is what forms each chakra. So whenever we have sexual traumas, we have our root chakra, our sacral chakra. These two centers have a distortion. So everything, like all the energy, originates from it has like a little filter that doesn't allow you to really experience the energy in its purest form, because that trauma wants to work itself out. So if it wants to work itself out, it has been given a dragon to ride, and it's like, yes, let's go. Like, I'm on this boat. But that can bring a lot of problems. There's this tantra teacher. Her name was Isaza, and she was a red tantra practitioner. She also experienced a lot of childhood trauma, and she had a very tragic ending to her life. She committed suicide. And I remember when I first heard about this many years ago, and I was really into her work. I could feel like the amount of power that you move in this practice. If you don't set up those foundations correctly, especially when there is some sort of trauma, it does have that risk of almost like just breaking our own container, our own energetic container. And this can turn into, actually lust being the driving force for the tantric practice. And we don't want that. We want to purify that energy from lust and from distortions and from all of like the, different levels of imprint that we receive whenever there are impacts to those energetic centers before we start actively pulling the energy. That's why Pink Tantra for me provides like the safest way of exploring this energy, because you're also not making yourself susceptible to either being manipulated. There's all these horror stories that I've heard throughout the years of learning Tantra about different centers where they do tantric workshops, and it's part of like, they step straight into red Tantra, like get naked and let other strangers look at you. And these actually are traumatizing experiences. And usually the people that get attracted to that whenever they haven't had any sort of foundation on Tantra are people that have trauma, because that's the energetic match. So Pink Tantra is done by ourselves. It's an internal process. Even if we have a sexual partner that we can practice with, the practices are all internal. And that for me provides safety for the exploration. It keeps the energy contained. It keeps us very aware of like whenever lust or repression or judgment are popping up in the tantric practice. So this is why we're going to be exploring this path. And because it is a left-hand path, so basically the left-hand path, I'll link a video in the description box from this woman. Her name is Dr. Puka, I think. And she is a religious studies PhD. And she has a great video about the left hand. But basically, like the Spark Note version of it is that right hand is everything that is like orthodox, known, acceptable in society. Left hand is everything that is taboo. So any practices that are goddess-centric, the majority of them are considered left hand because, the world we live in. So this is more on that left hand path side, which is, it could be the wild, wild west in certain religions, in certain cults, in certain groups. And in this case, I've gathered the like foundational work of the right hand, of like the orthodox mantric practice to kind of set up that foundation. Then after that said, we're into exploratory territory. So why even practice Tantra? I am not going to stand over here and tell you, oh, you're going to have bigger orgasms, a better sex life, feel more vibrant, even though those might be some symptoms of, not symptoms, but, these are gifts that Tantra eventually does give us, because sexual energy and sexuality is a very big part of our life. It's, it's like the driving force of the cosmos, basically. But what I will say is, Tantra in Sanskrit means weaving, to weave together. And if we look at life from the perspective of like, okay, we are born here, like we get separated from the oneness, and then there's this first separation that happens. And if we experience some sort of developmental wounds, there's even more fragmentation that happens. So we're like in this process of like breaking apart, breaking apart. Tantra is a path to weave things together, and is weaving them at the primal level, at the root, at the sexual energy level. Now, when I say sexual energy, I'm not talking about like sexuality. I'm talking about just like that pulse of life, that dormant kundalini energy that, you know, it's ready to expand. It's like what separates us from just intelligent animals. This is the bridge of animal and divinity. And for me, that's the human. The human is the merging of our animal nature with our divine nature. So Tantra is a path that helps us weave that together. And the weaving that is happening internally is the weaving of our inner Shiva with our inner Shakti. Practically, this means your ability to be present and remain grounded in the perception of being the observer of everything you are, and being able to meet all parts of yourself as Shakti, and being able to identify them as Shakti as well. So in this process of being able to truly observe and witness, and being able to receive and observe like the goddess, we're not seeing ourselves like, oh, that's my shadow, that's this, that's that. No. It's almost like something shows up, and to be able to like melt that with awareness, with pure consciousness. That's the tantric path. And whenever we do this at an internal level, as we begin pulling the energy up and expanding and growing into it, eventually that will translate into our relationships, into how we perceive other people and life, and how we're able to connect in sexuality from a very intentional place. So that's why there's this deep focus on sexuality in Tantra, but at the root level, it's a deeply internal process of being able to create that inner marriage of your awareness with your Shakti. And your Shakti means like everything that you're observing, everything that is, men and women, like everything is part of Shakti. And Shakti is, it's the power of Shiva. So Shiva is empty consciousness. Shakti is the fullness of everything. If you are unsure about like what I'm talking about with Shakti, I'm gonna also link the video of the 10 Mahavidyas, so you can kind of explore all of the different phases of Shakti and the different energies, because we're gonna be working with one of them tomorrow, one out of the 10 goddesses. Okay, so there are a few prerequisites that I think are necessary for us to have before we enter into a tantric path. Number one is to be able to already have a devotional disposition to life. This is, when I say devotional nature, I'm talking like devotion to whatever God is to you, to the divine, to the cosmos. If you don't like the word God, then, whatever that is, right? Like devotion to a creator aspect. If you don't have that, I recommend maybe exploring Buddhist Tantra, like Tibetan Tantra, because that caters more to that. This specific path of Pink Tantra that's rooted in Shakta Tantra is for the deeply devotional people that perceive themselves as the creation of a creator, a creative force. Even though it's all one, it's all part of us, there is this there's this genuine love for God, for divinity, for life itself. So because this is, a path of love in a way, that needs to be there. And this devotional nature, for me, it's the fuel and the glue of the practice. Number two, it's very important that you have already, at some degree, acknowledged your developmental wounds, mother wound and father wound. Why? Because like I said before, if there's trauma, right? Like mother wound, father wound work, sexual wounds, all of that, those are those first two chakras. And if we have a distortion there, it's almost as if like the energy is coming out in a different mold than its purest shape. So whenever we begin clearing those traumas, we're purifying those energetic centers, and the energy can move smoothly. It doesn't mean that you have to be healed, which I don't like that word at all. I'll share why in a little bit, but you don't have to be like, oh, I already healed my mother. Like for me, these are lifelong journeys. All of our life, we have to really explore these developmental wounds and move with them. But if you're completely oblivious to them and you're like, no, I don't have any mother wound, any father wound, nothing, everything's perfect, most likely there's a it's hiding right there in the shadow. So this is important, because if you're not aware of it, you will get confused. A lot of things move whenever we are working with sexual energy. A lot of things, deep things that we didn't even know of. And it's important to have to be able to already have done some exploratory work on like the emotional body and the mother wound, and being able to identify and have discernment over what things are, and be able to name our feelings. Because whenever things start getting triggered, we're able to say like, oh my God, I can feel this, and I can connect it to here. So I know this isn't like, this is a distortion. The moment you see the distortion, it disappears. That's the beauty of it. But this ability to see the distortion in the expression of sexual energy, it's only developed after we have done this inner work. And, I'm not going to say like here, you have to have this many years of that. Like, connect with yourself. Like in your heart, do you feel like you're in a really good place with that? Or are you still in the chaos of just like constantly projecting onto, mom and dad? Or are you unable to hold space for your emotions? Because that is the mother wound. Do you just lose your identity constantly, collapse, and do you lack discernment? Because that is the father wound. And if that's the case, then make sure you check out my program, Venusian Woman, because in that program, 2 of the 3 pillars are dedicated to the mother wound and the father wound. And that program is like the foundation, like the pre-work of this work that we are working through here today. If you feel like, okay, no, this I've spent plenty of years working on that and I can see myself, I can see my patterns, then you're good. Because then you'll be able to, like I said, perceive those distortions as they start popping up. And the moment you perceive them, it's transmuted, it's healed, because that's your inner Shiva illuminating that part of yourself. Like I said, it's important to have devotional nature in this. If there's a lot of developmental wounds or unacknowledged mother wounds, father wounds, what tends to happen is that whenever we start practicing Tantra, this devotional love that we have for God, for Source, the Creator, can sometimes get transferred into the partner. And we perceive the beloved, the lover, like the other, as that. And we don't want to do that. In Bhakti yoga, this is the devotional yoga, you have Krishna and the gopis. And it's so important to understand the symbolism of this, because basically, like Radharani, and the gopis, they are the feminine aspect that connects like the consort of Krishna. They are not together. They are like, Krishna is in his world and Radharani is in her world, yet their love prevails. This is Bhakti yoga. This is devotional yoga, the prerequisite for the Tantric path, which means that the real beloved, that source, is not in another human, even though it's in all of the humans. What you're like, to project that God onto a human is to set both of yourselves up for failure and a lot of trauma and a lot of pain. It's not fair for anybody, right? Like, we are all human beings, sacred animals, very intelligent, spiritual creatures that are exploring life on this planet. Everybody, all of us. The biggest Tantra guru, the lowest of the low, we're right here, right? And this humble attitude is really going to prevent a lot of unnecessary suffering. So being able to keep that separation intact, to know like, yes, this devotional part of myself, is not for a human, it's for all humans, because in reality, all humans are like drops of this divine force, but that real devotional love is for God, Source, unity, consciousness. Like, that's the pure connection. It's important to stay grounded in that as we're moving through the next 9 days. And if you choose to continue the path of Pink Tantra, to make sure that you are grounded in that truth. That doesn't matter how much you think that somebody is like the one soulmate and then they embody that, that beloved aspect of divinity. is not in a human, because it's source and we access it to ourselves, and this is why Tantra begins in the self. um another another prerequisite, I will say, is to have already identified or being able to work on the polarity game, right? Like, where is my masculine? How does it show up? Where is my feminine? How does it show up? Why? Because we have a lot of imbalance in the world. And a lot of the things that are celebrated are masculine in nature, and society tends to really shame the feminine parts of ourselves, both men and women. Okay, I'm not talking about men and women, I'm talking about the feminine of humans and the masculine of humans. So if you don't if you're trapped in an identity that is masculine in nature, you're gonna take Tantra as a thing to do. And Tantra is something that we receive. It's like opening up ourselves into ourselves. I know that's weird in the wording. It's just like, it's almost like the energy you receive from you, and that allows you to receive from the outside. And whenever it's time to give, it's like there's more expansion. But if there is a lot of entrapment in a masculine, like patriarchal, mold, you're gonna find that everything feels like tight, like you won't feel the energy. Shakti needs space to move, and this space is created in being able to loosen up some of those rigid structures that we build around ourselves, and to begin to create a little bit of space for the apparent chaos, because at first it does feel like chaos whenever we start playing with the feminine polarity. So if you feel good with, like, no, I can see myself whenever I'm like falling into like masculine rigidity, or whenever I'm falling into feminine chaos, and I'm able to just navigate, observe, like, that's the only, you don't need to fix anything. As long as you see it, then you're good, because that's why I said you need to have eyes to see what's going on. I don't mean physical eyes, you need to have eyes to see what the energy is doing and how it's moving. All right, so what is this process like? So we understand we begin with white and then we start adding some of the red. This means that we're gonna start with mantra, because my teacher says there's no tantra without mantra. This is the how you're going to be able to also differentiate the kind of like abusive neo-tantric environments that exist. I'm not saying all of them are, I'm saying like that does exist, and usually people get like freaked out with tantra because of those stories. But with mantra, that's how you'll know, like, what is the difference, because the mantra is going to offer like a direct line of communication with the specific flavor of Shakti that we're connecting with for this specific weaving that we're going to be doing in the next 9 days. So by starting with mantra, the weaving process starts internally. It's like I am connecting my body, my spirit, my soul, my energetic centers to the divine within, using the technology of sound. Also, these mantras, think about like how old they are. They are in Sanskrit. Sanskrit is an ancient language. It's considered a holy language, and there's a reason for all of these things. Whenever I don't remember who was it, but there was this clairvoyant way back in the day, that she will say that whenever people chanted mantras, their throat center started churning energy, and like it's like the whole body got illuminated. So there's something that happens, and there are so many books about the power of mantra. At the end of the day, I think the most important thing to do for me, this is true in most things in life, is that I have to feel it and try it to see if it's for me or not, because maybe it's not for you. So this is going to give you a very a good understanding of whether this type of tantra is for you. Because whenever you start doing the mantra and you do it properly, you set that foundation, that starts moving everything. Right after we set that foundation, then we're gonna start adding a little bit of red to the white, which means that we'll start doing some sexual practices with yourself. It all starts with the body. People think that sexuality is about two people having sex, and it is not. Same thing with orgasms, it's like it's not the goal. There's no such thing as goal in Tantra. It's not like, oh, you have the orgasm and then all of a sudden, or like the multi-orgasmic experience. Like, what does that even mean? The depth of this is to be able to understand the nuances and feel the nuance of the energy, because if you are able to do that, that spreads over time. And that's like the multi-orgasmic experience, because you're no longer trapped in like the maya of the body where it's just responding to stimuli. This is a spiritual experience. So if it starts with the body and it starts with very gentle way of connecting with our physical bodies. Elevator pitch for Pink Tantra, right? Pink Tantra is your sexuality, your sensuality, and the path of seduction in the physical body. So, sensuality, to be able to feel my body, feel my sexual energy. Sexuality, to be able to open, to receive, to connect physically. And then the path of seduction, and that is the energetic interplay between the feminine and the masculine energies. So to prepare for the next 8 days and everything we're going to be doing, please make sure that you download the workbook that I put in the description box below. This is going to have things that there's so many things that I'm not going to be able to play out in the video. You have to read them and do them for yourself. So the mantras, the nyasa ritual, the bath rituals, all of that is going to be in the actual workbook. Make sure you download that. And for today, the only practice that we're going to do is to be able to sit in complete stillness for 5 minutes. Sounds easy, right? Just find a comfortable position. Make sure that your back's straight. Make sure that you can have your leg, like you can sit down in a chair, or you can sit down and cross your legs in the floor, however you're more comfortable, but your back does need to be straight. And just put a timer for 5 minutes to find that inner stillness. What we're doing in this very simple process is like, it's to be able to invite that inner Shiva, right? For you to like be able to push your awareness and just enter into that seat. Stillness is the foundation of White Tantra. From stillness, whenever we bring in mantra, we are creating that direct line of communication. And once that foundation established, then we begin playing with the sexual energy. So that's your only homework for today. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and I will see you guys tomorrow.